Purnamesya Sarvadharmaswarupini Avataravarishtaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. The subject today is if Swami Vivekananda were returned today. The subject may appear to be a bit strange, a bit speculative. But in reality, if you think of some of the changes that happened during these almost 150 years of Swamiji's, less than 150 years, Swamiji's Chicago lecture speech in 1893 and to our own times, in the developments, the new paradigms which have emerged in politics, religion, spirituality, the concept of religious harmony, the synthesis of Eastern and Western values. Some of these ideas were emphasized by Vivekananda, and that is his distinct contribution to the cultural history of humanity. The very idea that every nation, every society has its own uniqueness, its own unique contributions to the totality of human civilization. This idea was articulated historically for the first time by Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda in 1893, when he came to this country to attend the Parliament of Religion, the first Parliament of Religion, 1893, at Chicago. But from those times to our own times, what all happened and how Swamiji would have responded to the current situation. For example, religion. Swamiji defined religion as spirituality, and he articulated this unique concept of practical Vedanta and universal religion. There can be one universal spiritual ideal which could define the religious aspirations of different communities and different traditions. And Swamiji called it universal religion. Essentially, it is Vedanta. The idea that every religion is an equally valid path that leads you to your own spiritual enlightenment. There is no such thing as a wrong religion. There may be somebody who is trying to practice it in the wrong way, but religion itself is not at fault. So Swamiji defined religion as spirituality. But you have to keep in mind that during Swamiji's times, many of the original canons of some of the Abrahamic traditions were not available either in translations or, of course, there was no internet at that time. This is a crucial point. So Vivekananda's acquaintance with many of these religious traditions, which he talks about, were only secondary. He could not help it because you can't study the old Arab, the ancient Zoroastrian religion, the Hebrew, especially in the late 19th century. Swamiji was educated almost the same way in which maybe students must have received education in Oxford or Cambridge in the late 19th century. So there is no difference actually. He studied Western philosophy, of course he studied Sanskrit. He studied Eastern religions, Eastern philosophical systems, and also he studied Western philosophical traditions. So he was very familiar with the Occidental or Western cultural religious traditions. And he found there were some problems that the Abrahamic religions were facing, especially Christianity in the later half of 19th century, especially after the publications of the great works of Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species, and of course Karl Marx Das Kapital and Communist Manifesto, which he published along with Engels. Swamiji actually refers to all this, in fact, in his lectures. Because these were the subjects that had to study as he went to his college, the university. And then he found some minor problems, and so he developed this idea of a universal religion, which summarizes the spiritual aspirations, the natural urge of every human being for something compassionate, something universal. And he coined this unique expression, universal religion. That means all religions are equally valid paths leading to this spiritual destination. God doesn't close his doors before anyone. Even agnostics and atheists have a place in God's empire. So even this tradition, a spiritual paradigm that even embraces non-believers, that's something revolutionary and radical. And then its practical application, he called it practical Vedanta. In our life, when we purify our actions, our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then we become more compassionate, more spiritual, and there's a sense of true religion, defined as spirituality. Now, from Vivekananda's times to our own times, let us just take a look at the cultural, the religious, the spiritual landscape that has undergone a lot of changes, not always for the better. I believe if Swami Vivekananda had come to Europe today, I don't think he would have much optimism in his mind at what's going on in the world, in the Middle East, in Asia, and also in especially Europe, Asia, and Middle East. So sometimes the fanaticism that Swamiji talks about, which he criticizes, which he condemned, in his first Chicago address, is manifesting in much more inhuman, much more diabolical forms in this 21st century. So do you think Vivekananda would be very optimistic? He would feel relieved. Where is universal religion today? So you have to think of this. Then about culture, nationalism. From Vivekananda to our own times, we have witnessed a number of world-shaking, cataclysmic upheavals at the political and also the cultural level. Almost 12 years after Swamiji's passing away, the beginnings of the First World War. He passed away in 1902. And then from 1914 onwards, we are entering a new era of the First World War. And then something that he actually predicted, Vivekananda predicted some kind of a social upheaval in Russia. Because when he was traveling in Eastern Europe, what is called Balkans, he talks about the Balkanization of Eastern Europe. So in his European travels, he talks about what he saw in Eastern Europe, Czechoslovakia, what is now Czechoslovakia, Bosnia, and many other East European countries, Poland, and so on. He took a train from Paris all the way through Turkey. So what he heard and what he witnessed. And then what happened? The First World War took place. And that also saw the emergence of, for the first time in the history of the world, great genocidal cults, which were not directly linked to religion. Before 20th century, most of the terrible events the world witnessed took place in the name of religion and on behalf of God. The Crusades and Inquisitions and many other events that took place, except perhaps the exception of Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, and of course the Punic Wars. All other terrible things took place in the name of religion and on behalf of God. But in 20th century, these two terrible movements, fascism and Nazism, in Germany and Italy, and the Japanese imperialism in all its diabolical forms. And after Second World War, Vivekananda, this is also something that you would not have visualized. The forming of the United Nations before the legal nation which actually collapsed. The United Nations and the Vietnam War and Korean War, which in a way indirectly led to the realization of something that Vivekananda predicted. The flow of religious culture, spiritual values from the east to west. See, after Vietnam War and Korean War, I leave aside this military or imperialistic political overtones, but at the cultural level and religious level, a lot of Buddhism, a lot of Buddhist ideas, Buddhist values began to spread first in the United States and then in Europe. It first happened in this country. So all these veterans who returned from Vietnam and Cambodia and Korea, they brought with them a lot of Buddhism. And they never had any hostile feelings towards people living in Korea or Vietnam. That's why we find so many Vietnamese Koreans all over the United States. So they brought with them a lot of Buddhist values, which I'm not exaggerating Vivekananda's contribution, which Swami Vivekananda actually predicted. Eastern values will one day spread all over the United States. When he talked about Eastern values, he was not just talking about Hinduism or Vedanta. He was implying the traditional cultural values of Buddhism and so on. And then, of course, along with Vedanta, right from 1950s, 60s onwards, you can find Hinduism in various forms. It may be Hare Krishna movement. Vedanta came much later. In 19th century, Vedanta came along with Vivekananda. Hinduism came here along with Swami Vivekananda. But Buddhism and different diverse denominations and groups and cults all linked to Hinduism also began to spread like wildfire, sometimes in the form of yoga, sometimes in the form of some distant, remote forms of meditation, which may not have anything much to do with its original roots. For example, mindfulness, or yoga as we find today. In one way, it is actually a fulfillment of what Vivekananda actually predicted. Yoga everywhere. But yoga exercise was not what Vivekananda was implying. So there is something that a teacher can give, there is something else that a student can observe. And then mindfulness. Mindfulness, the English word, has become almost an icon. Frequently, there is a deliberate effort to detach mindfulness from its original source, which actually is discoursed by Buddha, that you find in the Mahasatyupattana Sutta and Satyupattana Sutta, the two Pali canons. But there are, of course, great American teachers who memorize all this Pali canon, and you can find today many monks go to Sri Lanka and Burma to study Pali. Of course, India also, Dharmasthala, Varanasi, they go to study Buddhism in the original form. Now you can see that happening. The road was opened by Vivekananda in 1893, and the road is being taken, that journey is being undertaken by so many diverse groups, really speaking. Paramahamsa Yogananda or Chinmaya Mission or Amrita Mission or ISKCON, all these are just different manifestations. Some of them do acknowledge Some of them do not, of course. They're all actually the beneficiaries of Vivekananda's work, because he just built a royal highway, maybe 6-lane, 10-lane highway, and through which a number of people came. So this is what is now happening. But that was in 20th century. Coming to 21st century, something else is happening. You know, this emergence of course, that's happened in China from 1980s onwards. That also Vivekananda somehow predicted the Chinaman will emerge, something. Of course, he may not have meant this, the horrendous manifestation that is happening today, but he talks about the possibility of Russia and China emerging, not in terms of being a superpower or anything, but a cultural and nationalistic revival. Of course, he never had in his mind the slightest notions of the terrible manifestations of that emergence that we are witnessing in today's world. It's an entirely different matter. But then along with that, something else that's not confined to one country. The emergence of science and technology in their new manifestations, not always in pleasant or helpful or useful or helpful forms, but in the diabolical forms, computers, internets, mobile phones, and then I should not miss that artificial intelligence. This is another interesting. With regard to artificial intelligence, and where it can be very helpful and where it is no more helpful, there is a very interesting paragraph in Vivekananda's complete works. It's a well-known paragraph. It talks about the difference between a mighty, powerful, a huge machine and the intelligence of a tiny worm or mosquito or an insect. So, if artificial intelligence could make a Buddha or a Shankaracharya, Ramakrishna, it is fine. But it can create a being, a machine that can do work, intellectual work, physical work, in a big scale, in unimaginably big scale. That he actually implies in this paragraph. So think of a huge locomotive. That's what he is talking about. This is from complete works. A huge locomotive which travels maybe 100 miles an hour, and carrying 3,000 people, maybe 2 miles long. And it is taking and is moving at this gigantic speed. And there's a tiny worm or a mosquito or insect that is trapped on the rail track. The locomotive is coming, is sound, the earth is shaking around. So the mosquito or maybe this insect feels that it is unsafe. So it moves aside to escape, to save its life. But this machine, the locomotive, cannot exert or make use of its own intelligence. Its intelligence is borrowed from somebody else. It's not its own intelligence. Because that intelligence is second hand. It is put into the machine by a human being who can think for himself. The locomotive cannot think for itself, but the insect can think for itself. And it can change its mind and move aside and save its life. Now, Vivekananda talks about the need to use wisdom along with knowledge. Knowledge, when not properly utilized or understood or defined, can be self-destructive. But if knowledge is mixed with wisdom, then it can be for the good of humanity. It is very striking that in the lectures that he gave in the last decade of 19th century, which could not have visualized the emergence of many of the modern developments in science and technology, especially in computers, internet, and also in mobile phones, all the revolutions that happened in transportation and communication. There was no way that somebody could have predicted in the last decade of 19th century. But he talks about the need to keep intact the importance of wisdom, and that wisdom can come only by understanding, by self-inquiry, by understanding our own limitations. And that is a unique gift given to human beings and not a machine. So maybe that interesting imagery of the huge locomotive moving but helpless, it cannot stop if it wants. It will move relentlessly and it would have killed insect. But insect, so insignificant, could change its mind and take a decision on its own. So some of Vivekananda's ideas are very, very relevant to our own times. He was not a dreamer, and he was a very realistic person. You have to remember, there is a trend in modern times, even in the West, even among many American over-enthusiastic Orientalists, you can find this tendency to exaggerate the importance of ancient wisdom. But Vivekananda didn't belong to that category. He was not a dreamer. He was not living in a utopian world. He was very realistic. So, without giving up his realistic perception, he emphasized the need to harmonize wisdom with knowledge, spirituality with science and technology. Science and technology are important. They represent a huge machine, but spirituality, or religion defined as spirituality. That's very important. Religion, very often, as it is understood, unfortunately, even in today's world, religion as is very often defined, which frequently very divisive, can turn an entire community or nation very violent, very crude and horrendous in its hostility towards everyone else. So that religion was defined by Vivekananda. Religion is an English word, coming from Latin or Greek. But Vivekananda gave it a new interpretation. Religion is spirituality. So if you define religion as spirituality, that religion as spirituality should be synthesized and harmonized along with science and technology. So that's the age that we are living in now. That some aspects of this Swami Vivekananda did anticipate and did predict, but some aspects perhaps did not find expression, especially the new movements happening in the name of religion. That's something very, very interesting. What we see in the Middle East, what we see in Europe, and in some ways in Asia, including India, and also even sometimes terrible things happening in America, all because of religion going back to its old tribalistic roots, tribal roots, some religious traditions, which Swami Vivekananda did not actually predict. This is a very interesting aspect about this. Now coming back to some other important subjects. Swamiji talks about the antiquity and continuity of Vedanta or Hinduism. So there are some very interesting, very important statements in Swamiji's complete works. If you take this, let's say for example, the third volume, which contains the Colombo to Almora lectures. Vivekananda came to this country and attended Parliament of Religion in September 1893. He went back to India in 1897 for the first time after his first visit, and he landed in what is now Sri Lanka. At that time it's called Ceylon, Colombo, the capital city of Sri Lanka. And there, on 15 January 1897, Vivekananda gave a lecture. In that lecture, he makes a very important observation. If Manu came back today, he would not be bewildered and would not find himself in a foreign land. If Manu came back today, he would not be bewildered and would not find himself in a foreign land. These are the words from Vivekananda, 1897, January 15. Now, what did it mean? What did he mean by that? It needs some explanation, especially in Western context. Manu is the name of a great sage who lived perhaps in the 4th millennium BC. And he is the most ancient lawgiver of Hindu tradition. He interpreted and defined the laws for society, life in a social context, life in a family, and also life in a kingdom. At that time, it was the age of monarchies. So how a subject should be loyal to the king or country, how a husband and wife should be careful in bringing up their children, how children should be respectful and reverential to their parents. All these ideas were articulated by Manu in his Manu Smriti. It's part of many of these teachings, some of the great teachings of these Smritis. Altogether are 18 important Smritis, altogether more than 33. So many of them were later accommodated into Indian Constitution when Indian Constitution was drafted after India's independence. So there Manu says that if Vivekananda says that if this ancient lawgiver of Vedic times, early Vedic age, returned to India in 1897, he would find that the country remains the same. The society continues to function in the same fashion in which he saw it 6,000 years earlier. This may appear to be very strange. Now, if you go to this Bay Area, if you go to these temples in Livermore, all these temples, the temple architecture, in some ways, even this foreign country, it represents the temple architecture of India, which it developed 3,000 years, 4,000 years before Christ, in 4000 BC. The music, the art forms, all the dance forms that you find, all these Bharatanatyam, all that you find, music. The science of these arts and dance forms were defined and interpreted in books like Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra and so on in ancient times. So they continue to flourish even in this modern age, though they are very ancient. So the antiquity and continuity of this tradition. This is what Vivekananda is talking about. Now, and then he says, observing what is happening around him, he says, every religious tradition has two sets of values, so two types of teachings every religious tradition offers. One, certain unique, universal, spiritual values which are relevant for all times, which can be practiced by all people everywhere in this world. Every civilized, refined human being can practice certain universal spiritual humanistic values like compassion, mercy, friendliness, all these great kindness, all these qualities, which are spiritual qualities, which should be and could be practiced by every sincere soul. Now, they constitute the core values of every religious tradition. It's called spiritual values. Then there are certain values which are linked to the particular community in which a great religious teacher is born, or the language that he speaks, in which he teaches his people, in which he writes down his doctrines, or the food habits, the dress code, the weather conditions, the flora and fauna, all these, the ecological system, all these may be different from one tradition to another tradition. So these are minor, these are secondary, these are changing values, which are not universal. Suppose you go to a new country and tell them you should practice what was written in some book 1500 years ago. Now it will be impossible even to conceive of that, because a lot of changes have happened in human society, in science and technology, in the way of life during the last 15 centuries. How can you go back all the way 15 centuries backward? Impossible. So Vivekananda says these are all secondary. They should change, they should be changed. So he divides religious, cultural and spiritual values into two categories. Certain universal, for example, in modern time, even in politics you find the democratic institutions, the adult franchise, the voting rights, equal rights for everyone. These are universal in any political system. They should be universal in any social political system. But there are other aspects which may not be universal, which could be different from one country to another country, one society to another society, one continent to another continent. So this is true in education also, in family values also, even in human interactions. So one important contribution of Vivekananda, which he articulated with forceful language, is that we should always prefer the universal values, and we should, whenever we find that these social values, social customs are in conflict with the universal values, then we should change, we should modify the social values to make them compatible with the universal spiritual values. But now, and actually you find, if you read the history of Vedanta society, those American men and women who went to Shanti Ashrama in 1900, when Swami Tattwamayananda came to this country, he was sent here by Vivekananda, a monk, a follower of Sri Ramakrishna. He was sent here by Swami Vivekananda, and he went to Shanti Ashrama, about 90 miles away from here. And he built a monastery, and for 2 years he taught scriptures, meditation, yoga, and things like that. And so when he came, sometimes 20, 30, 40, 45 men and women, sometimes very old women and women, followed him there and built monasteries and cabins, stayed there, meditated, taught, studied, and got inspiration from this great Swami. Now, what he taught, for example, were universal. You should be a good human being, you should try to meditate, you should focus on the presence of the divine everywhere, in everything. Now, these are taught in the ancient scriptures. So, and remember, 1900 was not exactly very similar to our own times. Practically, it was almost an extension of Wild West, with no negative connotation. Wild West had its own greatness about it. But Olima, Shanti, these places were not like the refined, happening places like Chicago and East Coast in 1900. It was still somewhat wild, sufficiently wild. But still these people, They went with him, they built cabins, and they dug wells and they found water, and they lived there for 2 years. And it continued for another several decades, for 4 decades longer. Because what he taught, what he brought here was the universal values. Now if you, for example, in Christian tradition, let us say the teachings of Sermon on the Mount, some of the great parables of the New Testament. And also you find great teachings of Buddhism, of Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, Bhagavad, all the scriptures of Hinduism, Judaism. You find Buddhism, you find Jaina traditions. Many great teachings, and you just follow them, you become a spiritual person. So Swamiji said that this should be the core of our cultural religious paradigm. But today what you are finding is the other way around. The universal, the humanistic teachings are sometimes pushed to the back seats, and the socio-anthropological diversities are projected. This was something, I think this goes against Vivekananda's own prophecy. Swamiji predicted that in course of time, there will be a new civilization. Remember, we had to wait long enough to see Swami Vivekananda's expectations taking shape. It may take a little longer. But I'm talking about the present situation. Sometimes religions, instead of becoming broad-minded, they become more and more tribalistic, going back to the tribal roots. So this is something that Vivekananda would not have appreciated in modern times. So, and again, there are also some interesting views which can be very relevant in today's context. For example, Vivekananda's definition of modernity and his definition of civilization and culture. He draws a line of demarcation between civilization and culture. Maybe mostly because he takes these ideas from ancient Hindu scriptures. You have to remember, after teaching, preaching, after writing all these, to the end of his life, he told his brother disciples, I have only taught the Upanishads. If you look at what I have read, what I have taught, what I preach, you find I have only taught the Upanishads. The Upanishads constitute the more universal, humanistic, spiritual teachings of Vedic heritage. Vedas contain many things. Vedas contain pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, monism also. It contains ideas which may appear very tribalistic, but Vedas also contain very, very universal. So Vivekananda actually says we should take the universal, the unifying, the harmonizing aspects of Vedic culture. And they are found in the Upanishads. So he says, in the Upanishadic tradition, in the Vedic tradition, the word culture implies what we call Samskriti in Sanskrit language. It means something refining, polishing, more elevating values of human existence. That is called Samskriti. Samskriti means something refining. You put oil, you process it, you get, you put seeds, you process it, you get oil. A petroleum, or you excavate and you get petroleum products. So like that, through this process of processing or refining, you get the refined products, like oil refinery. That's called Samskriti. And civilization is called Parishkriti, means external refinements, not necessarily internal. External means dress code, science, technology, communications, wonderful things. External things. So Vivekananda says it's not enough to be civilized. It's also necessary to be cultured. Of course, again, these two terms may not be very different in the context of our times, but in the original Sanskrit tradition, Parishkriti is a word for civilization, Samskriti is the word for culture. Culture or Samskriti implies inner refinement. Spiritually, you elevate yourself by spiritual disciplines, ethical disciplines, moral disciplines, by practicing certain higher values, which may be called eightfold disciplines in Buddhist tradition that we discussed maybe 2 weeks ago, or maybe last and the previous week. Or yama niyamas in the yoga tradition, or you may call prayers in any other religious traditions, called Samskriti or culture. Now, perhaps Vivekananda would have felt that we have walked backward in culture and walked forward in civilization. So walking forward in civilization implies having more advanced gadgets, technology, applications, appliances of scientific, technological achievements. That is called civilization, urban planning and things like that. Culture means spiritual values, family values, certain fundamental ethical moral values, whether you draw from them religion or not, whatever may be. In fact, great men like Buddha are examples that you can be very civilized and very cultured, very spiritual without any assistance from God. Buddha is an example. So, actually when Vivekananda talks about Buddhism, he considers this as something unique. Today it's being very much understood in modern America, for example. Buddhism is very popular. For one reason, it's very simple. So anyone can be a Buddhist in the evening, and in morning he can go to some other tradition. So people want to put all together. At least in that respect, they are practicing some kind of something that's certainly far better than doing nothing. So that way Buddhism is a great sense, gives a lot of relief. So what Vivekananda said was, today in the late 19th century, he said that we should practice not only certain values necessary for the advancement of civilization, we should also emphasize the values for the advancement of culture. It's called Parishkriti in Sanskrit. And that's the essence of modernity. So we should try to harmonize the tradition with the modern. The modern doesn't necessarily mean scientific and technological. The modern also should mean a more modernized forms of ancient values which are made more applicable to our own times. So he talks about this need for the synthesis and harmonization of Eastern and Western values, not only civilization but also cultural values. Another very important point that he makes, remember, these are statements coming from Vivekananda long before some of the latest developments began to take place in the field of science and technology. For example, economic growth. Economic growth has become a reality now in many parts of the world. They are using science and technology. Many of the traditionally poor nations have emerged economic superpowers, or they are on the way to emerge as superpowers. But this also happens at a terrible cost. Global warming was certainly not something that Vivekananda ever anticipated. But in one context, in one lecture, he refers to an ancient Vedic mantra. He doesn't quote that Sanskrit statement. It's found in Rig Veda and Yajurveda, Atharvaveda, all Vedic tradition. Dev Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Oshadaya Shanti, Vanaspadaya Shanti, etc. Actually, it's a very interesting concept. So global warming was not anticipated in the late 19th century, but Swamiji talks about the need to return to nature and return to Mother Earth. This, he was referring perhaps to some of the Vedic mantras. So today when you hear news in social media and the print media about the problems of global warming, floods, deaths and destruction of properties, and destruction of livestock everywhere due to floods caused by global warming, you can imagine Vivekananda's emphasis on living in tune, living in close, friendly relationship with nature. And he used the word Mother Earth. So Mother Earth is a concept that directly comes from Veda, Atharvaveda and Yajurveda. Prithvi Suktam, Bhumi Suktam, these are some of the two important hymns are found in Vedic literature. One looks upon earth as a mother and sun as father. Prithvi Suktam tells you that we are only guests on this earth. We should not become intruders. We should not become invaders. So, if today when we hear the predictions of the possibility of disappearance of many islands, many parts of the world can get submerged within the next 40, 50 years due to global warming or floods caused by global warming. So Swamiji's reference to the ancient Vedic mantras, which insist that we are not invaders, we are not intruders, we are only guests on this earth. If you don't, actually you don't have to take care of earth. Earth will take care of you in a very nasty, in a very unpleasant fashion if you don't live in close proximity, in close friendly relationship with nature. So sometimes oceans will invade islands, islands can disappear, which means the humanity can, many places, the world, human civilization, human existence can be at peril. So, the importance of living in close proximity with nature. Vivekananda takes this idea most probably from Bhumi Suktam and Prithvi Suktam, two important hymns in the Vedic tradition, and also from the Yajurveda prayer, Dev Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Osodaya Shanti, etc. There will be peace and happiness, joy and fulfillment and blessedness everywhere, in the oceans, in the mountains, the valleys, in the rivers, in the clouds, in the sky, on earth, and our own hearts. You can do some of these prayers. We see sometimes literally translates. So, in a way, I don't think he is going to be very optimistic if he finds the situation going on in this world today. But still, there are many things we can learn from Vivekananda's words, which are very relevant, and especially in culture and religion. Swamiji insists that there are some universal, spiritual, humanistic values which are very universal, which if practiced by a man or a family or a civilization or a nation, will exalt them to higher level, will give them peace in their hearts, and people around them also will be peaceful and feel secure. Otherwise, what happens? The other option is dangerous. We may go back to tribalistic roots, and in that case, suppose somebody tells you, you should literally interpret every word, every comma, every full stop, exactly as it was written 1500 years ago. That is going back to tribalistic times. And he actually warns against these possibilities. The Chicago Address itself, towards the end of Chicago Address, he talks about the dangers of fanaticism, the dangers of bloodshed taking place in the name of religion and God. That is precisely what he means by going back to tribal roots. So some of these ideas from complete works are very, very universal, and also they contain, on the one hand, they contain an assurance. If we practice these values, there is scope for optimism. If not, there is also a mildly worded warning that otherwise, he also, in the first lecture also contains that there is a possibility of unpleasant things that could happen using the most refined, the mildest possible language. So thank you, namaskar. Now we will have, of course, yes. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
स्वस्ति प्रजाभ्यः परिपालयन्तां न्यायेन मार्गेण महिं महिषाः गोब्राह्मणेभ्यः शुभमस्तु नित्यं लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु काले वर्षतु पर्जन्यः पृथिवी सस्यशालिनी देशोऽयं क्षोभरहितः ब्राह्मणाः सन्तु निर्भयाः ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
So we have some important announcement today. We are now beginning our summer recess from Monday, July the 1st, Saturday to Saturday, September 7th. So beginning with Monday, July the 1st, till Saturday, September 7th, 2024, there will be no lectures or classes during the summer recess, except for the Sunday evening class at 6 p.m. in the evening, the foundational text of Indian philosophy, which will be continued to be held online on Sunday 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So please remember, we are now beginning our summer recess from Monday, July 1st, till Saturday, September 7th. And there will be no lecture, no Sunday lecture, and also there will be no Friday class on the Bhagavad Gita at the old temple on Fridays. But one important class will continue that is the foundational text of Indian philosophy class, online class will continue to be held on Sundays at 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Including today, it will continue. Please note, the online class will continue to be held on Sunday evening throughout the summer recess when we are in summer recess. And we will also continue to have Arati Vespers on or Vespers on Wednesday evening, 7:30 p.m. Devotional singing, worship and meditation will continue as usual during summer recess. And we have some important programs during this summer recess. Guru Purnima celebration, Sunday, July 21st. New Temple, 10 a.m. We cordially invite you to the new temple in Vallejo Street, San Francisco on Sunday, July 21st at 10 a.m. in the new temple here. And we celebrate Guru Purnima, the date devoted to honoring the spiritual teacher. The program will include a worship, puja, chanting, meditation, devotional music, arati, a talk on the role of the Guru ideal in human civilization, flower offerings by devotees, prasad, luncheon, etc. Child care will be provided. So please remember, Sunday, July the 21st, Guru Purnima celebration at 10 a.m. in this auditorium. Then we have another important event during this time, our Labor Day retreat, August 31st, September 1st and September 2nd, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. The Labor Day retreat will be held in Vedanta Retreat, Olima, Erin County. The topic for the Labor Day retreat is spiritual journey, the story of a spiritual transformation from Bhagavata Purana. Saturday and Sunday, morning session, afternoon session, 10 to 11:30 a.m. and 3 to 4:30 p.m. respectively. Monday, only 10 to 11:30 a.m. Each session will be accompanied by a talk and interaction. So more details you find in our September bulletin, and also you find a link for RSVP in our website homepage. So very soon we will put an RSVP announcement on the website. You can RSVP. Thank you. And please continue to monitor our website at savedanta.org for the latest information. So, as we mentioned, we have our summer recess from July 1st to September 7th through Saturday, September 7th. So the next lecture season will begin on Sunday, September the 8th. The Friday evening class at the Old Temple on the Bhagavad Gita will resume on September 13th. You can get this information from the website homepage. So there will be Wednesday Vesper service at 7:30, and also the Stanford Hindu Students Association program. The foundational text of Indian philosophy will continue throughout the summer. The Zoom and YouTube links are available on our website homepage as well as in the monthly email bulletin. And the special programs I already mentioned. One is Guru Purnima, Sunday, July 21st at 10 a.m. And it will have programs from morning 10 a.m. till about 3 in the afternoon. Worship, puja, lecture, talks, music, and also some important events. So our bookshop will be open as usual on Saturdays and Sundays from 1 to 4 p.m. However, please check the website for any changes to the schedule. Bookshop orders can continue to be placed online. As usual, after the lecture, there will be a Q&A, question and answer session. You can come to Vivekananda Hall. All are welcome. And we wish you all a healthy and happy summer. And we look forward to seeing you at a special event, Kuti Purnima and Labor Day retreat. Thank you.